Hello, my wonderful students. We are in our textbook. On page 82. We are on page 82. Page 82. So in our textbook on page 82, we are going to practice this whole page. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be asking questions, and we look here for the answers. Okay, so the questions that we're going to be asking is number one is going to be where. So remember, where is a question for location. So where is a question for location. We are also asking what for information. Do you, they, do. When we ask a question about do, what do you do, we are asking the question work. What work do you do? What's your job? When we use he and she, we need to use does. Yes, more simple present tense words that we need to use. We're going to be using does, he, she, do, and this is also work or job. So for number one, we have my name is Linda. I live in London. I work in a library. So the question number one that we ask is, so question number one is, where does, because it's he, she, where does she live? The answer is she lives in London. She lives in London. Question number two, what does she do? What does she do? And the answer is she works in a library. So question number one is, where does she live? And the answer is she lives in London. She lives in London. So we don't say I live because we are asking about Linda. Where does she live? The next one, my name is Brian. I live in Boston. I work in a bank. Question number one, where does Brian live? Now, is Brian he or she? Correct, he. So the answer is he lives in Boston. The second question is, what does, because we're using he, what does he do? It's his job. He works in a bank. He works in a bank. We're Walter and Wendy. We live in Washington, D.C. We work in an office. We work in an office. Question number one, we are asking about where, location. Where do, because this is I, you, we, they, we use do. Where do Walter and Wendy live? And the answer is plural. They. It's not we, they. They live in Washington, D.C. The next question is, what do they do? They work in an office. They work in an office. My name is Bob. I live in Buffalo. I drive a bus. Question number 1. Where does Bob live? Where does Bob live? Is Bob he or she? Correct, he. So the answer is he lives in Buffalo. He lives in Buffalo. Question number 2. What does he do? What does he do? Answer, he drives, an S, he drives a bus. He drives a bus. The next one. We're Howard and Henry. We live in Honolulu. We paint houses. We paint houses. Question number 1 is correct. You're going faster than I am. Where do Howard and Henry live? And the answer is plural. They live in Honolulu. They live in Honolulu. What do they do? Correct. They paint houses. They paint houses. My name is Tina. I live in Tampa. I drive a taxi. He or she? Correct, she. So the first question is, where does Tina live? She. Correct. Oh, you guys are so fast. She lives in Tampa. She lives in Tampa. Question number 2. What does she do? What does she do? She drives a taxi. She drives a taxi. We're Carol and Ray. We live in Cleveland. We live in Cleveland. We cook in a restaurant. We cook in a restaurant. Question number 1, singular or plural? Oh, we'll do this first. Where do Carol and Ray live? Plural. Answer, they. They live in Cleveland. They live in Cleveland. Question number 2. What do they do? Is it we cook? They cook in a restaurant. They cook in a restaurant. Next one. My name is Susan. I live in San Diego. I sell cars. Where, location, where does Susan live? Where does Susan live? Now, is this singular or plural? Correct, singular. He or she? Correct, she. And we need to have the S. Right, correct. She lives in San Diego. She lives in San Diego. Question number 2. What does she do? What does she do? And the answer is she sells, we need the S, she sells cars. She sells cars. My name is Victor. I live in Vancouver. I play the violin. Question 1. Where does Victor live? Where does Victor live? Singular or plural? Correct. Singular. He or she? Correct. He. So the answer is he lives in Vancouver. He lives in Vancouver. Question number 2. What does he do? What does he do? What does he do? Correct. He, because it is he plays the violin. He plays the violin.